My name is Natalie Carter, and I'm the same age as in the original story. Looking back now, I realize there were countless moments when I should have understood the truth much sooner. But when you're a child, you don't question the people who are supposed to love you. You simply keep hoping that tomorrow will finally be different. If I had to describe my family in one sentence, it would be this. My parents didn't have 2 children. They had 1 child they adored, and one they simply remembered existed. That favorite was my younger brother, Ryan. From the day he was born, my parents, Mark and Linda, acted as though the universe itself had gifted them someone extraordinary. Every smile he flashed was celebrated. Every tiny accomplishment became family news. Every mistake he made was excused before anyone even mentioned it. I was just there. I wasn't difficult. I wasn't rebellious. I simply wasn't Ryan. I was quieter, happier with books than parties, more interested in sketching ideas than showing off in front of people. While Ryan filled every room with loud confidence, I found comfort creating things by myself. Instead of asking why I was different, my parents simply stopped looking. At first, the favoritism was subtle. Ryan always seemed to get the newer toys, the bigger bedroom, the nicer clothes. Whenever I noticed, I'd convince myself it was because he was younger. He'll appreciate it more, Mom would say with a smile. I believed her. Children always want to believe their parents. But year after year, the excuses changed, while the outcome never did. Ryan's birthdays became neighborhood events. There were decorations covering the house, dozens of guests, expensive presents stacked beside the cake, and enough excitement to make it feel like a national holiday. Mine, usually, a grocery store cake, a rushed happy birthday. Then everyone quickly returned to discussing Ryan's latest interest, one birthday. I asked for a professional art kit. Drawing had become my escape. Creating beautiful things helped me forget how invisible I felt. Instead, my parents handed me a cheap package of colored pens they'd bought at a discount store. That same week, Ryan received a brand new mountain bike worth hundreds of dollars. I smiled anyway. Not because I wasn't hurt, because I had already learned that showing disappointment only made me seem ungrateful. The emotional neglect hurt far more than the missing gifts. When I earned straight A's in middle school, I carried my report card home like it was a trophy. Maybe this time, maybe they'd finally notice. Mom, I said excitedly. Look. She glanced at the paper for barely 2 seconds. That's nice. Natalie. Then she immediately turned toward Ryan. Tell me more about your basketball game, your father said. Everyone was cheering. Ryan had scored exactly 2 points. I had earned perfect grades. Guess which achievement mattered? After a while, I stopped comparing. Comparison only made the loneliness worse. Whenever Ryan developed a new hobby, my parents rushed to support him. Music lessons, sports equipment, private coaching, brand new electronics. Whatever he wanted somehow became a family priority. When I mentioned wanting to open a small online store selling handmade crafts, Dad laughed as though I'd told a joke. Natalie, he said, shaking his head. Focus on something practical. I quietly nodded. Months later, Ryan announced he wanted to launch a fitness equipment brand. The reaction couldn't have been more different. Dad immediately started talking budgets. Mom searched for office space online. Within weeks, they had paid for professional branding, expensive equipment, a custom website, and even hired a designer to build his logo. I sat at the kitchen table listening to them celebrate another one of Ryan's dreams. No one asked about mine. Not once. That night I stared at the ceiling, wondering something I'd never been brave enough to admit before. Was I actually unwanted? Or was I simply born second? By high school, I'd stopped expecting fairness. Expectations only created disappointment. Ryan knew exactly where he stood in the family. Sometimes he'd grin after receiving another expensive gift and whisper so only I could hear, "Guess whose mom and dad love more?" I'd pretend not to hear. At dinner, if I started talking about school or an idea I was excited about, Ryan would interrupt within seconds. My parents laughed. "Nathalie." Mom would say, smiling, "Don't be so sensitive. He's only teasing." Only teasing. Those words became the soundtrack of my childhood. One moment still plays in my head more vividly than any other. During my senior year, I entered a regional competition for young entrepreneurs. I spent weeks designing prototypes, practicing presentations, and rewriting every detail until everything felt perfect. Against all expectations, I won first place. Driving home, I couldn't stop smiling. For just a moment, I allowed myself to imagine hearing the words I'd wanted my entire life. "We're proud of you." Instead, after I shared the news, Dad barely looked away from his laptop. "That's nice, Nathalie." Then he turned the screen toward Mom. "Have you seen Ryan's new business logo? Doesn't it look professional?" Mom smiled proudly. "It really does." No one mentioned my competition again. That night, I cried alone in my bedroom, not because they ignored another accomplishment, but because I finally understood something I'd spent years refusing to believe. Nothing I ever achieved would matter. As long as Ryan existed to outshine me, that realization didn't break me. It freed me. If my own family couldn't see my value, I'd build a life where someone else would. And when I finally walked away, they wouldn't even notice I was gone. The morning after graduation, I stopped waiting for my parents to believe in me. I stopped waiting for an apology. Stopped waiting for fairness. Stopped waiting to become important enough for them to notice. If I wanted a future, I would have to build it with my own hands. And if there was one lesson my family had unknowingly taught me, it was this: invisible people learn how to work in silence. While my parents poured every spare dollar into Ryan's latest business fantasy, I quietly started building something real. I never mentioned it again after Dad laughed at my first idea. Why would I? Every conversation about my dreams ended exactly the same way. "That's unrealistic. You should be practical. Maybe help your brother instead." So I smiled and kept my plans to myself. After school, I worked every job I could find. I tutored younger students, babysat on weekends, designed simple graphics for freelance clients online. Sometimes I'd tell my parents I was staying late at the library. Other times I claimed I was studying with classmates. They never questioned it. Not because they trusted me, because they barely paid attention. Most evenings, the house revolved around Ryan. Dad reviewed his business plans. Mom searched for investors. They argued over marketing budgets, office furniture, logos, and equipment. Meanwhile, I sat upstairs in my tiny bedroom, teaching myself everything I could about running an online business: marketing, product photography, website design, shipping logistics, customer service. There wasn't anyone encouraging me, no mentor, no family cheering me on, just endless tutorials playing late into the night while the rest of the house slept. It was exhausting, but it also felt strangely peaceful. For the first time in my life, every hour I invested was building something that belonged to me. Eventually, an idea started taking shape. I would create personalized products, custom mugs, notebooks, tote bags, planners, and stationery, designed for niche communities that struggled to find products matching their interests. It wasn't revolutionary, but it solved a problem. I found an affordable supplier willing to work with small orders, designed everything myself, packed every shipment by hand. The day my first order came through, I stared at the notification for almost a full minute. Someone I had never met, had spent money on something I created. It was only $15, but I cried anyway. Not because of the money, because for the first time in years, someone believed my work had value. Downstairs, Ryan was living an entirely different reality. His fitness brand had become an endless money pit. He constantly held meetings with friends who seemed more interested in drinking beer than building a company. Clients rarely stayed. Deadlines slipped. Excuses multiplied. Every time another problem surfaced, my parents responded exactly the same way. More money, more equipment, another consultant, a better office, a fresh start. Dad would clap Ryan on the shoulder. Successful people don't quit. Mom would smile proudly. We believe in you. I often wondered what it felt like to have people believe in you before you'd accomplished anything. Because I had spent my entire life trying to earn something Ryan received automatically, while his business quietly collapsed. Mine slowly found its audience. Customers began recommending my shop online. Social media posts reached larger audiences. Small communities shared photos of my products. Word spread. Orders doubled, then tripled. Every sale funded the next improvement. Better equipment, better packaging, new designs. Nothing happened overnight, but everything moved forward. By the time I graduated, I wasn't rich. Far from it, but I was earning enough to support myself. There was just one more decision to make. Leave, or remain the forgotten daughter forever. The answer came easier than I expected. I found a tiny office in another state. The rent was affordable. The walls needed repainting. The carpet had seen better decades. The single office chair squeaked every time I leaned back. I loved it instantly. It was mine. I signed the lease the day after graduation. When I told my parents I was moving out, neither of them looked particularly surprised. Dad barely glanced away from helping Ryan revise another business proposal. Good, he said casually. Maybe now you'll have more time to help your brother. I smiled. Maybe. Inside, I already knew they would never see me again unless I wanted them to. Neither of them asked where I was moving. Not the city. Not the address. Not even which state. Mom simply reminded me to call occasionally. Then she returned to discussing Ryan's newest marketing strategy. As I loaded the last box into my car, I paused outside the house. Part of me expected someone to run outside, to hug me, to tell me they loved me, to ask me not to go. The front door never opened. I drove away without anyone watching. It hurt, but it also confirmed I had made the right decision. Starting over wasn't glamorous. I assembled furniture by myself, painted the office walls, organized inventory until midnight, learned how to negotiate shipping contracts, answered customer emails over breakfast, packed orders until my fingers cramped. Every success felt earned. Every failure became another lesson. Within the first year, I expanded into personalized planners and premium notebooks. Corporate clients began placing bulk orders. Wedding organizers contacted me about customized gifts. Local retailers asked to carry some of my products. I hired my first part-time assistant. A few months later, another, then another. Watching someone else pack products carrying my company's logo was surreal. The little dream my parents had laughed at was becoming a real business. Ironically, they still had absolutely no idea. Whenever I visited home for holidays, Dad always asked the same question. So, Natalie, have you figured out your career yet? I almost laughed every single time. I'm working on it. That answer satisfied him, because he never asked another question. Ryan, meanwhile, continued chasing one failed venture after another. His expensive office sat empty. The professionally designed website rarely changed. His team slowly disappeared. Still, my parents refused to admit reality. They insisted success was just around the corner. The more they invested, the deeper they sank. By my third year in business, everything had changed. My company generated multiple streams of revenue. Several retailers carried my products. Large custom orders filled my calendar months in advance. For the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving. I was thriving. Not because someone believed in me, because I had learned to believe in myself. Then, one quiet Tuesday morning, while reviewing plans for a major product launch, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally, I ignored those. Something told me to answer. Hello? A familiar voice responded. Natalie. It's Dad. I froze. He almost never called me. Not unless he wanted something. After a brief silence, he cleared his throat. Ryan has another business opportunity. Of course he did. We're all getting together this weekend to help him plan everything out. I leaned back in my chair, and we'd like you to come home. I already knew where this conversation was headed. We need everyone's ideas. Dad continued. Family should support each other. I let out a quiet laugh. Not because it was funny, because it was painfully predictable. You want me to help Ryan build another company? He just needs the right support this time. I stared through my office window at the employees working inside the company I had built completely alone. Funny, no one had offered me support when I needed it most. Dad, I said calmly, I already have a business to run. There was a pause. Then confusion entered his voice. What business? I smiled to myself. For 3 years, my own parents had never cared enough to ask. I looked around my office before answering. Shelves lined with neatly packed products. 3 employees moving between workstations. A whiteboard covered with upcoming wholesale orders. The company logo I designed years ago, hanging proudly on the wall. Everything surrounding me had once existed only inside my imagination. Everything my parents had dismissed as impossible. My business? I repeated calmly. The one I've been building for the past few years. Silence. The kind of silence that tells you someone's entire understanding of reality has just collapsed. Dad finally laughed. Except it wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. Very funny. Natalie, I'm serious. You mean a little side hustle? No. My actual company. Another pause. What exactly are you talking about? I leaned back in my chair. I moved to another state after graduation. What? I rented an office. I built an online business. I employ people. I'm doing very well. For several seconds he didn't say a word. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded strangely uncertain. You moved? Yes. When? 3 years ago. You never told us. I almost laughed. I did tell you I was moving. You never asked where. The silence that followed hurt more than I expected, because even now, he couldn't remember. Finally, he cleared his throat. Well, that's impressive. It sounded awkward, forced, as though he were congratulating a complete stranger. Then his voice shifted. So, if business is going that well? There it was, the real conversation. Maybe you could help Ryan get back on his feet. I closed my eyes. Even after learning I'd built an entire company alone, his first instinct was still Ryan. Dad. What? I'm not flying across the country to rescue another one of Ryan's business ideas. You don't understand. No. You don't understand. He sighed heavily. People are talking What? They're asking why Ryan keeps failing. Our family's reputation is suffering. I stared at the phone. After everything, this wasn't about Ryan. It wasn't even about me. It was about appearances. I'm sorry, I said quietly. I have my own responsibilities. We're family. I know. So families help each other. I spent 22 years hoping my family would help me. He didn't answer. Instead, he tried something different. If you don't come, we'll stop supporting you financially. That one actually made me smile. Dad, I haven't taken a single dollar from you in years. What are you talking about? I've been paying my own bills, my own rent, my own employees, my own taxes. I don't need your support. His breathing became uneven. You're serious. I've never been more serious. He whispered something under his breath before hanging up without saying goodbye. I assumed that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next afternoon, my phone rang again. Hi, sweetheart. Mom. Her voice sounded softer than I remembered. Almost fragile. Nathalie. We need to talk. What do you need? Mom? She sighed dramatically. It's your brother. Of course it was. He's under so much pressure. We're worried about him. We think it would mean the world if you came home. I walked toward the office window overlooking the parking lot. Cars came and went. Employees laughed together outside during lunch. The life I'd created felt so peaceful compared to the chaos waiting back home. I'm not coming. But he's your brother. And I spent my childhood being invisible because he was your favorite, Nathalie. We're still family. No, I interrupted gently. You were Ryan's family. I was simply someone who lived in the same house. Her breathing caught. That's unfair. Is it? When I won my business competition, did you celebrate? Silence. When I asked for help starting my company, what did Dad say? More silence. When I moved away, did either of you ask where I was going? Nothing. Finally, she whispered. We made mistakes. You made choices. They lasted my entire childhood. She started crying. Real tears. At one point, those tears would have broken my heart. Now, they simply exhausted me. I'm sorry you're hurting. But Ryan's problems aren't mine. I ended the call. For the next week, the messages never stopped. Dad left angry voicemails. Mom sent paragraphs about forgiveness, family, loyalty, second chances. I ignored every one of them. Then something unexpected happened. One afternoon, I received a message from Emily, one of my old high school friends. Nathalie, your dad came by the community college asking about you. I frowned. She continued. He was trying to get your student records. Apparently, he'd assumed I had been attending classes all these years. When the registrar informed him there was no record of me, he completely lost his temper. I couldn't even imagine the expression on his face. That evening, my phone exploded again. Dad. This time, he didn't even bother saying hello. What did you do with the tuition money we sent you? I invested it. In what? My company. You lied to us. I protected my future. That money was for school, and it became the foundation of my business. He was shouting now. You manipulated us. I remained surprisingly calm. No. You simply never cared enough to notice what I was actually doing. He launched into a lecture about honesty, trust, respect. Finally, I'd had enough. You want to talk about trust? Where was yours when I brought home straight A's? When I won competitions? When I asked for support? When I packed my car and moved away? You didn't even know which state I lived in. Complete silence. You never noticed. I disappeared. You only noticed once you realized I had money. Click. He hung up. A week later, my receptionist knocked on my office door. "There's a woman here asking for you." "Who?" "She says she's your mother." For a moment, I simply stared. My mother, standing inside my company, the business she'd never believed could exist. I told the receptionist to let her in. Mom stepped inside slowly. Her eyes traveled across the office, the employees, the inventory, the conference room. Every detail seemed to erase another piece of the story she'd believed about me. She swallowed. "I had no idea." "No, you didn't." For the first time in years, she looked genuinely ashamed. "I've been so proud of Ryan that—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "You forgot you had a daughter." Tears filled her eyes. "Nathalie, your father and I want to make things right." I folded my arms. "How?" She hesitated, long enough that I already knew the answer. "We're struggling financially." There it was. Not reconciliation. Need. Ryan's last business failed. We've borrowed against the house. We're behind on everything. Her voice became almost inaudible. "We were hoping you could lend us some money." I let out a slow breath. Years. They had ignored me for years. Now, they wanted my success. Not me. My success. "I'm sorry, but I'm not your emergency fund." Her expression hardened. "We're your parents. And I was your daughter. You should help family." I spent my childhood begging to be treated like family. She stood abruptly. "I can't believe how selfish you've become." I looked directly into her eyes. "No, I finally learned how to stop sacrificing myself for people who never chose me." She left without another word. 3 days later, Ryan walked through the same office door. Except this time, the golden child looked anything but golden. Ryan stood awkwardly just inside my office. His confidence gone. Gone was the expensive jacket my parents used to buy him every season. Gone was the cocky grin that had followed him through our childhood. His clothes were wrinkled. Dark circles sat beneath his eyes. For the first time in my life, my younger brother looked scared. "Hi, Nathalie." His voice was almost unrecognizable. I gestured toward the chair across from my desk. He sat without another word, staring at his hands for several long seconds. Finally, he spoke. "I know I probably don't deserve 5 minutes of your time." "No," I replied honestly. "You probably don't." He nodded slowly. I figured. Silence settled between us. Years of resentment filled the room more loudly than any conversation ever could. Eventually he looked up. "I'm sorry." I didn't answer. I know saying that doesn't erase anything. It doesn't. "I was awful to you." "Yes. I thought Mom and Dad were right." His voice cracked. "They always acted like I was special. I believed them." I studied his face. There wasn't arrogance anymore, only regret. I kept thinking if I stayed their favorite, everything would work out. He laughed bitterly. "I didn't realize I was helping destroy this family." I folded my arms. "You enjoyed it." He closed his eyes. "I know. I remember every joke, every time I interrupted you, every birthday. I remember laughing because I thought it made me important." His shoulders slumped. "I was a kid. Then I became an adult. And I never changed." For the first time, I believed he actually understood. But understanding wasn't the same as forgiveness. "What do you want from me?" He hesitated. "I don't know. Mom and Dad blame me for everything now. They say I ruined their lives. Weren't they the ones who kept funding your businesses?" "They were. So why are they blaming only you?" He stared at the floor. "Because it's easier." I couldn't argue with that. Our parents had spent decades refusing to accept responsibility. Nothing had changed. I thought if I came here, maybe we could start over. I shook my head gently. Start over. You don't start over after 20 years. You build something completely new. And right now, I don't know if I want to. He nodded. I understand. He stood up slowly. I'm sorry, Natalie, for everything. He walked toward the door before stopping. I really was proud when I heard about your company. I just wish I'd been the kind of brother who told you that sooner. Then he left. For several weeks, everything became quiet. No phone calls, no guilt trips, no surprise visits. For the first time since leaving home, peace finally settled into my life. I assumed the story had ended. Then, a handwritten letter arrived. The envelope carried my mother's familiar handwriting. Inside was 6 pages. Some sections were stained by tears. She admitted things I'd never imagined hearing. They had refinanced their home multiple times to keep funding Ryan's businesses. Every failed investment led to another loan, another credit card, another promise that the next opportunity would finally succeed. Instead, everything collapsed. The bank foreclosed on the house. The home I'd grown up in, Gone, my parents were living in a tiny apartment across town. Ryan had already left after accepting temporary work in another state, hoping to rebuild his own life. Ironically, the son they'd sacrificed everything for wasn't there anymore. The daughter they'd ignored was the only person they believed could save them. Near the end of the letter, Mom wrote, "We finally understand what we did to you. Please give us one chance to become better parents than we were." I read those lines several times. Part of me wanted to throw the letter away. Another part remembered being 8 years old, waiting by the front window for parents who never came to watch my school art show. Some wounds never disappear. They simply become quieter. A few weeks later, my aunt called. "Natalie, your parents are in serious trouble." "I know. It gets worse." She explained that Dad had become involved in a lawsuit after an argument with a former business associate. Legal fees were piling up. Debt continued growing. They're terrified. I rubbed my forehead. What do you want me to do? I'm not saying you owe them anything. You don't. I just thought you deserved to know. That night, I barely slept. Anger and compassion wrestled inside me. I didn't owe my parents anything. That much was true. But I also didn't want my entire future defined by resentment. The next morning, I made a decision. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Boundaries. I called Mom. She answered before the first ring finished. "Natalie, it's me." She immediately began crying. "I'm so sorry. I know. I don't expect forgiveness. You shouldn't." Silence. Then she whispered, "What happens now?" I looked out the window of my office, the same office that had once begun with peeling paint and a squeaky chair. "I'll help once." She gasped, "But listen carefully. This is not repayment. This is not because you earned it. This is because I refuse to become the bitter person your choices almost turned me into." A week later, I drove to the apartment where my parents now lived. It was dramatically different from the comfortable home they'd once owned. Small, dark, almost empty. Mom opened the door. She looked older, not just physically, emotionally. Dad slowly stood from an old couch. His pride seemed to have disappeared, along with everything else. "Natalie." He couldn't finish the sentence. I sat at the small kitchen table. "I'm willing to help." Their eyes immediately filled with hope. I raised my hand. "Don't misunderstand. This isn't a blank check. I'll help organize your finances. I'll cover a few urgent bills. I'll introduce you to someone who can help restructure your debt. But after that, you're responsible for your own lives." Dad lowered his head. "I understand." "No, you finally do." Over the following days, I reviewed every document they owned. Credit cards, loans, mortgage paperwork, legal expenses. Years of poor decisions covered the table. I negotiated payment plans, helped consolidate smaller debts, covered several emergency expenses, so utilities wouldn't be disconnected. Nothing more. Every dollar came with one condition. No more funding impossible dreams. No more treating one child as more valuable than another. No more pretending responsibility belonged to someone else. To my surprise, they agreed. Without arguing, without excuses, one afternoon, Mom quietly asked, "Do you think we'll ever be a real family again?" I considered the question carefully. I don't know. Trust isn't rebuilt with apologies. It's rebuilt with years of different choices. She nodded, wiping away tears. I understand. For the first time, I believed she actually did. Today, our relationship remains cautious. We speak occasionally. They've both found part-time jobs. They manage their own bills. Ryan and I exchange messages from time to time. We're not close, but we're no longer enemies. The greatest victory wasn't building a successful company. It wasn't becoming wealthy. It wasn't proving my parents wrong. It was finally understanding that my worth had never depended on whether they noticed me. For years, I believed being invisible meant I wasn't enough. Now, I know the truth. Sometimes people fail to see your value, not because you lack it, but because they're too busy looking in the wrong direction